Do an intro. Just give us a, hey, whatever, and
I guess we should just say
joining a conversation.
Joining in progress.
Because we're an idiot and we didn't start the fucking show the normal way.
I mean,
anytime it's just us, it has a tendency to just be that.
No Star Wars series on right now. What else? The
only
latest season of Mayans just ended, which was
the only other thing. Actually, the only other thing I've been watching, Dark Side of the Ring, baby.
Oh yeah,
that's the only thing I've been watching. Otherwise,
Dark Side of the Ring is another one that's really, and we could talk about Dark Side of the Ring, but I have to take a second to mark the passing of New Jack.
Rest in peace to New Jack.
That one hit me hard because I had it in my head that when everything ends, there's going to be the Roaches and there's going to be New Jack. Because ain't nothing killed that motherfucker yet. I saw that dude in person many times jumping off shit that he shouldn't be jumping off of. And
just get up and walk away.
He still lived to tell the tale. And I'll never forget the infamous Danbury fall. I watched it on pay-per-view. And I swear to God, I thought I watched a man die on live television. I will never forget watching that dive. If you're not familiar, definitely find, I'm sure it's probably on demand, or you could probably find it on YouTube or whatever. The episode of Dark Side of the Ring with New Jack is an absolute must.
If you haven't watched that.
If you have not seen it already.
You need to go watch that. Just to understand who the man was.
Because he was crazy. There was no difference between... There was no character.
Right.
Jerome Young and New Jack were pretty much just about the same. You know, some guys get into character, like... There was just New Jack. Because that dude was wild. And there's plenty of stories in there about shit that he got into that got him in a lot of trouble. Shit that should have gotten him into a lot of trouble and amazingly did not, like the Danbury thing in the aftermath where he basically decided to get the dude back.
Right.
Because by the way,
the mass transit issue.
The mass transit incident is legendary. And they put up, Pro Wrestling Tees put up a store selling some New Jack t-shirts that are going to help his wife, you know, pay for the services and the burial and everything. And one of them is a drawing of New Jack falling, and it just says "bombs away." Because when he talks about throwing Vic Grimes off the scaffold, and he says "bombs away," because he was trying to throw him out.
Was wild. Because when I found out about New Jack, I was still watching The Rock. Like, I was watching WWE at the time. I had started to watch ECW here and there, and that's how I came to know about New Jack. And he's one of those people, like Bernard Hopkins, where I don't think that I want to be in the room with him.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, as long as I don't know where I stand with him, I'm in danger.
Honestly, I'm pretty sure I was in the same room with him once, and I didn't speak to him. And I didn't get the opportunity because we were busy doing different things. And I thought to myself, like, yeah, it might be better that way. Like, I don't really know how a conversation with New Jack would go. Like, it could go south at any minute.
We don't know where this is headed.
Yeah, you never know. Like I said, I saw him do many things in person at the Elks Lodge in Queens for the most part. I also funny story I probably told on here before. I also saw him one time. ECW did a show at Freeport High School on Long Island. And since it's a high school, they got to work clean.
Right.
So it was him and Mustafa, who was his old partner in the Gangsters, having a match against each other with no weapons, no blood, just a straight-up wrestling match, which was the strangest thing I think I've ever seen. Because nobody expected that.
Right.
But in a high school, that's what they had to do.
Hey,
You can't exactly start pulling out tables and shit in the high school because it's mostly high school kids in the crowd. So that was kind of crazy. But I've seen him jump off balconies. I saw, probably told this story too. Westchester County Center. He went up, jumped off the balcony, and apparently he wasn't supposed to. Mm-hmm. He was told not to. So as soon as he did that jump, a whole bunch of cops came running out one of the side doors.
Oh, Jesus.
And he ended up going into the back, and then they sorted it out somehow because he didn't get arrested that night. But they did get banned from the building after that. So, whatever. Because Paul Heyman had announced that they were going to do a pay-per-view in a couple of months from there. And then...
And just never happened.
After the show was done, I read... Because that was as internet wrestling news sites were starting to pick up. Because that was 99, 2000. I had read that they were not doing the pay-per-view because they were banned from the building after... I think it was because of that incident. It could have also been because of like the 5 fights that happened in the crowd that night.
Fights will happen. Boys will be boys, right?
And then, of course, Paul Heyman throwing a dude out, giving him his money back, and telling him to get the fuck out of my show. Which I have seen Paul Heyman do a few times, and that's always entertaining.
Speaking of Paul Heyman, you sent me that video of his tribute. It was fitting.
That was heavy because, to be honest with you...
He was about to cry the whole time.
Yeah, to be honest with you, and I was having this discussion in a wrestling group on Facebook, Paul Heyman did not have a good relationship with a lot of the guys that worked in ECW because he... If you don't know the history of ECW was always the little company that could, and they did a lot more than anybody ever expected them to do, but there were costs that came with that, and one of the costs was that Paul Heyman was like a used car salesman. He was always selling his guys on things, convincing them to do stuff, and convincing them to do it when he didn't have their money. Listen, I had a problem. I'll pay you for both shows at the next show. And then he would always, like, a lot of times at that next show he wouldn't have the money, but he would manage. He was such a slick talker that he would talk the guys into working the show anyway, and he was always talking to these guys and getting them revved up to do bigger things, and he was always... It was all charisma for Paul Heyman. So, New Jack is on record saying, I would like to kill Paul Heyman just to resurrect him so I can kill him again. So, as far as I know...
They never buried that hatchet.
They never buried that hatchet. I could be wrong, because that interview was from a couple of years ago. But I know in reading New Jack's book, which he only wrote fairly recently, he said some okay things about Heyman, but also some not so nice things. And New Jack was never one to mince words. So he wasn't holding back. But I don't know. Like, I know he used to have issues with Cornette, and they patched up.
Right.
But I don't know if New Jack and Heyman ever patched up.
Okay.
So, for Heyman to. I mean, obviously Heyman wasn't the one that had the issue, and it's understandable, especially if there was money involved and stuff like that. Because one of the weird things about ECW is that they did their last show, and Paul wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
He supposedly was in LA trying to get them a new TV deal. And then the couple of shows they had booked got canceled. And then my understanding from multiple sources is that they just fizzled out. Like, Heyman never contacted anybody. Heyman never told them. Like, Heyman was always telling them, hey, I'm trying to work on something. And then suddenly Heyman showed up working for WWE on Monday Night Raw doing commentary. And a lot of the guys that worked for ECW were pissed off because it's like, you couldn't even tell me. I got to find out watching TV on Monday night. Because that was when they knew the company was done.
Right, when he switched.
Here's Paul working for a different company now.
Now,
and
what happened?
And when he was in LA, by the way, when he was in LA allegedly trying to get them a new TV deal, he was actually filming a movie. Because if you ever saw the remake that they did of the movie Rollerball, when they do like the roller derby scenes, he's the commentary guy.
Okay.
And that's what he was out in LA doing. He wasn't getting a TV deal.
Now, riddle me this. I know that the WWE ate up a number of people from ECW.
Yes.
And that was written in as kind of an angle. Was that part of his deal for signing on for commentary, or was that them buying him out over time, or was that something completely different than that?
It was none of the above. What they ended up doing, because all those ECW guys, they didn't really have contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Because who would sign a contract when you don't have a TV deal? Because, like, what can you really offer? What are you offering a guy with a contract?
Right.
So most of those guys were working without contracts, and the ones that did have contracts, in a lot of cases, they had run out. What happened with WWE, or maybe they were still WWF at the time, I don't even remember. They had purchased WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Because WCW and ECW both went out of business within a couple of months of each other.
Right. That I remember.
I think ECW's last show was in February, and I think the last WCW Nitro was in March or April.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember exactly. But it was within a few months of each other. WCW, to make a long story short, they were trying to find somebody to buy it, and then suddenly Turner, who owned them, decided to drop them off of TV.
Mm-hmm.
And without a TV deal, the company was effectively worthless. So it screwed up the whole deal that somebody was working on. Because Eric Bischoff, who had worked with on and off with WCW for years, he was trying to put together a team of investors to buy the company. And then all of a sudden, without the TV deal, the investors were like, oh, fuck no. So it screwed them completely. And basically, the only interested buyer was Vince McMahon, who really wanted it mainly for the video.
Right, he wanted the back catalog.
But where that factors into this is that as part of that purchase, there were a handful of wrestlers who were under contract, and those contracts were part of the deal. Some of those wrestlers, especially the older ones like Sting and Flair, and probably Hogan. I could be wrong about Hogan, I'm not sure. Those guys had an option, so they decided to just sit at home. They were like, nah, because it was a guaranteed contract, so they're getting their
so they're
money
getting
either
paid
way.
anyway.
Some of the guys wanted to work, but some of the guys were like, nah, fuck it. So they ended up having a bunch of guys, and they decided to do an angle. There was a WCW invasion, which went terribly. And because it started off so terribly, what they decided to do was sign a bunch of the old ECW guys, and suddenly they threw them in with the WCW guys. So on one side, you had the WWF.
Right.
And on the other side, in this poor version of like an NWO angle, you had
the WCW guys.
Because this spun out of the last Nitro, because part of the big story on the last Nitro
was that one guy was on both shows, right?
Well, Vince was on both shows, and Vince was like, ha ha ha, I bought WCW, and then it turned out they revealed on the show, suddenly Shane McMahon comes out, and Shane's like, actually, I bought WCW.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the beginning of an angle. But like I said, it went to shit, and then suddenly, like, Shane and Stephanie own WCW, and then suddenly they're working with Heyman and a bunch of the ECW guys. So on one side you got WWF, the other side you got ECW and WCW. So you had a bunch of the ECW guys involved in that. And then eventually that whole angle fizzled out, and you had some of the ECW guys still working with them. They ended up relaunching ECW as a show on the Sci-Fi Channel, which did not do very well after a while. And they had also, well, they had also done a couple of separate ECW like reunion shows. The first one they did was pretty much a straight up ECW show. The second one was the beginning of them relaunching their version of ECW. And that went on for a while and eventually fizzled out. But over time, they had a couple of old ECW guys, and over time, those guys started to filter out, and it just became another show, and it lost people's interest. And then
it wasn't what it was.
No, because when Vince McMahon becomes ECW champion, everybody's like, "Oh, fuck this!"
Right. Well, so, I'd be fuck that right now.
Yeah. So it all kind of fell apart eventually, but that's all part of that ECW history, because Paul Heyman was working for them, and then I guess Paul was like, "Hey, let me call some of my guys, and we can bring them into this thing."
They're good workers. Let's get them into this.
Yeah, and they never invited New Jack, and he's always talked about it because he's like, yeah, they don't want me because they can't control me.
And that's the truth, though.
Which is true, because New Jack would have just been like, okay, you want me to do this? Okay. And he would just do what he wanted anyway. Because supposedly, the first balcony dive that he ever did, nobody told him to do it. He just did it because he wanted to do something that people would remember. And then after that, he also figured, because it's in his book, if I remember right, he was basically trying to think of something that if he did it, like, the crowd would remember it, because then Heyman would have to keep booking him.
Right. Because they need that same fix.
Which worked out perfectly. Smart man. Because that's exactly what happened, because then Heyman kept booking him, because like everybody wants to see New Jack. Everybody wants to see him jump off of shit. Because I've seen him jump off of balconies. I've seen him climb up on a ladder and jump off a basketball hoop. Or like a basketball backboard.
Right.
Like, wild shit. But,
yeah, I mean, I can't purport to be the biggest or most knowing New Jack fan. Not. Definitely not. But I'm well aware of the aura around him. And I mean, it was a bummer to hear that he had passed.
The other thing about him too was that he was a good talker, because it wasn't wasn't doing like scripted promos. He just, even from back when he was working in Smoky Mountain, Cornette would just give him some bullet points and he would just go. And actually it got to the point, I'm pretty sure Cornette said to him, just go out there and say some shit to make white people mad.
Right. And I mean, that's
what he did.
Basically what Cornette said in the episode on him on Dark Side of the Ring.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
that was perfect.
Detailed how he was just so good at riling up a crowd.
Yeah, because he didn't give a shit. He would just say some shit and immediately get people pissed off because, especially, well, Smoky Mountain, that was also the South.
Mm-hmm.
So it was easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's like shooting fish in a barrel at that point.
Right. Well, it's just like the other match that he had with Gypsy Joe that he talked about, and people were screaming N-word all over the place. Or even when he talked about the mass transit incident. Because we talked about it when we were talking about other court-related stuff. When he was talking about the mass transit incident, which he got arrested for, and he had to go on trial, and talking about the jury, which is what we were discussing previously, and there was one older black man on the jury, and once he heard that the mass transit kid, once he heard that kid's father called him the N-word,
it was
suddenly
game over.
He woke up in the jury box and was like, "What?" And right there, that was you're not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew what he was doing.
He did it very well.
Yeah, and he's a crazy dude. And like I said, there wasn't really a character. Like, he was just him. And
that's what makes the best character, though.
Absolutely,
because it's believable.
The best characters are just taking yourself and turning it up a notch.
It's an extension of you.
Yeah, and that was definitely what he did, and it's a sad loss. He was at the point where he couldn't really wrestle anymore. I saw him make an appearance on a show within the past year, and they had him come out and help somebody, and he could barely walk, and it was just tough to see. But it's obvious, like his ring days were over.
When you put that toll on your body, over time, it's just going to break down.
Oh, yeah.
So that brings me to this conversation about the episode that dropped this past week, Nick Gage. At some point, my man is not going to be able to function.
I could tell you this. I watched him this past weekend. He was on a show. And he's
slowing down.
He's slowing down. He's 40. And I got to say, and I know you're not up on this stuff like I am, because I watch a lot of deathmatch wrestling.
Yeah, I'm not a deathmatch kind of guy.
When you're over 40 and you're doing deathmatch stuff,
your days are numbered.
If you're still going, you're not anywhere near the same level. And most of the dudes that are over 40, well, let's say, I say over 40, but there's still some dudes that are right around there that are still doing it. But once you get, let's say, 45, the dudes that are still doing deathmatch stuff that are at that age shouldn't be, because they're just a shell compared to what they used to be. And I just don't, for the most part, I don't really find them enjoyable. It's just kind of painful to watch. There was a dude named Necro Butcher.
I know. I know the name.
Yeah, he's pretty well known. If you saw the movie The Wrestler, he was in there as in one of the matches. He's had some health problems recently. He actually was fighting cancer, and the word just came out recently that he's actually cancer free, which is great.
Good.
But I saw him wrestle a match against Schlack like a year and a half ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was painful to watch. Like, I felt like, much like what we were talking about with The Handmaid's Tale, like, I felt uncomfortable watching this match. And I've had that happen a few times with a few death matches.
Where it's just I feel like
well, with him, it just seemed like he wasn't really, he didn't have the ability.
Mm-hmm.
So it was painful to watch him trying to do shit. And there's been a couple other matches that I felt uncomfortable just because I felt like they were just trying to do too much, and it was just not, like, it was just unnecessary.
Right.
But with that match, it was uncomfortable because obviously he was nowhere near the ability that he had. Because I had seen him wrestle in person years before. And it's just, you don't want to see these guys doing that. Like, same thing like with Gypsy Joe. It's like, you don't want to see guys at that age still doing light tubes and shit, because it's just, it's just really fucking them up. And you can see that they don't have the movement that they used to.
Right.
And it's just, I don't enjoy it.
Well, yeah, I mean,
like, a lot of people just don't enjoy deathmatch stuff in general. I enjoy some of it, but I don't want to see guys who look like they can't move.
So this brings me to a point. I listened to Eugene do his podcast. He was on Bloody Elbow for a while. He's the singer of Oxbow.
Yes.
And Whipping Boy, etc. from back in the day. And he talks about UFC fighters in this manner. He's like, I don't want to watch someone I know I could beat.
Right.
And that's what it sounds like. You're saying, like, watching it's painful to watch them because I feel like it's me out there. Like, I'm of that age, and I'm not. I know I couldn't do it, and you barely can too. Like, what are we doing now?
No, I don't. It's a similar mentality. Like, I don't want to see guys pushing themselves too hard,
taking damage for no reason.
Yeah, like, none of this is. It's not enjoy. Like, obviously, MMA is different from wrestling, because wrestling is I hate to use the cliche of, like, entertainment, but it's it's two different things, but it's the same mentality. I don't want to see guys that I know can't work the same way anymore.
Right.
I don't want to see them overexerting themselves. Because there are some guys that are older that can still work. Like, who did I watch this weekend? Too Cold Scorpio wrestled a match. And that dude could still move.
Everybody ages different.
But obviously we're talking about different things with deathmatch stuff, because he's not a deathmatch guy. But Scorpio can still move. If Scorpio couldn't move the same way,
then you wouldn't want to watch it.
I wouldn't feel comfortable watching him, because you don't want to see these guys that are just a shell. Like the movie The Wrestler, the whole storyline of that movie is you see a lot of the guys that are past their prime and washed up, and it's like, does this guy still have the gas to keep going? And I don't want to see some of these guys, like, overexert themselves for my entertainment, because it's not entertaining me.
Right.
I would rather I'd rather see guys like that come out with somebody else as, like, a manager or whatever, or just do an autograph session or something like that. I'm totally good with. I don't want to see them getting in the ring and trying to work a match when you're just, the whole time you're just worried that they're going to get hurt. Like that takes the fun out of it.
Heart attack or whatever.
Yeah. Because there's another guy who wrestles who got seriously injured and works a lot of deathmatch stuff. He got sliced really bad under the arm by a light tube, and because of that, he has limited use of one of his hands.
And
again, you know, and I don't. I'm not. If you're a fan, you know who the guy is. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to feel like I'm shitting on him because I'm not. I enjoyed watching him
over the years.
It's just seeing his limited ability now. It's painful to watch him because I feel like one of these days he's going to get hurt because he can't do. He doesn't have the same ability now.
Can't do the things that he used to do.
He was working a match recently where he was putting handcuffs on the other guy, and like he couldn't put the handcuffs on. And it was just, and I feel bad because that's obviously the dude was doing it for a long time, and that was kind of how he made money. But like, it was just painful to watch because it's just, I don't want to see this dude like struggle. That's what it comes down to. Like, I don't want to see dudes struggle.
Right.
Like, if you're 50 years old and you're in a death match and I could see that you're struggling to keep going, like, that's not enjoyable to me.
That's not what you're there for. That's not entertainment.
That's not entertaining me. Like, that's turning me off. Like, that's making me want to step away from it because I don't find that enjoyable.
It's like, okay, I don't go to the strip club really at all, but it's like when you go to the strip club and there's the 57-year-old woman on the pole and you're just like, yo,
right.
I understand you got to make your money, but I'm not entertained by this.
Yeah, and it's like you just don't want to see that. There are probably people that still enjoy it, and that's fine. But just for me personally,
it's not on the list.
I don't like it. I don't enjoy it, and that's what it comes down to. And Nick Gage is not at that level. But he's still getting there. But he's getting there, and you could see that he's not moving as quickly as he was. He's still enjoyable because honestly, he's got charisma for days, and when he comes out, you've never seen a crowd go crazier.
Road Warrior level pop.
Oh, dude, if I showed you the footage from this past weekend, because I joked around, I was watching it with my girlfriend, and I said, well, I guess Dark Side of the Ring didn't hurt him at all, because from the second he comes out to "For Whom the Bell Tolls" by Metallica, and from the second that music starts playing, the entire crowd goes nuts, and they are all gathered at the entrance waiting for him to come out. And as soon as he comes out, they're just all around him, slapping him on the back, like you never seen a reaction like this. Everybody loves him, and
what is it about him that everybody loves so much? Like, I'm clearly not part of the deathmatch community, and like, what is it that you can put your finger on and be like, all right, I know exactly what it is. I mean, I know you mentioned he's got charisma, and that was one of the things that was brought up in the show.
Yeah,
guy's got charisma for days. Like, everybody was saying that.
I think it's that, and also, it's his home company because it's Game Changer Wrestling. He's the champion. He had lost the belt a while ago and finally got it back a month or so ago, after having a long feud with another dude named Ricky Shane Page, who was a total heel and used to talk a ton of shit, cut promos about him being a bank robber and shit. It was like, come get your belt, bank robber.
Well, I mean, technically he is a bank robber, so.
And actually, at that match that they did, Ricochet Page on the side of his pants had written on the side of his pants, it said, "Come get your belt, convict." So he's that level of heel. So the fact that he finally...
That's the kind of heel I'm into, though, so I'm fine with it.
For sure. Me too. So that long build that they had just got people more behind Nick Gage. Mm-hmm. And since it's Game Changer Wrestling, you got a lot of longtime fans, so they already know his whole story. A lot of people that didn't know his story learned about it from Dark Side of the Ring. But if you're a longtime fan and you followed him for a long time, you know his whole story because it's all been out there.
Right, none of it's fresh news.
Yeah, none of it's... I mean, listen, when the bank robbery happened, it was all over the local news.
I mean, I knew about the bank robbery.
Yeah. It was all over the local news, and then when he went back in, because they talk about it on the show, they booked, the Nick Gage Invitational Tournament, and the night before the Nick Gage Invitational Tournament, he goes back to jail.
Yeah.
So they couldn't exactly hide it. It's like the guy's name is on it, and he's not here. Like, are you just not going to mention it? So everybody knew his story, knew that he fucked up, and knew that it's the whole redemption story. And Dark Side of the Ring brought that to a bigger audience. But if you're a diehard fan, which most of the Game Changer Wrestling crowd is, like, I started watching it maybe 2 years ago, but They had history long before I started getting into it. And a lot of those fans have been there the whole time. So that's a big part of it. And it's just infectious because people see that reaction and then other people want to have that same reaction, and it just keeps going and going. So it's the whole feel-good story. Like, people want to back a guy like that because he turned himself around. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows the story. And... it's a feel-good story, and now here he is. Not only has he turned himself around, but he has made himself one of the top guys, not just in the company, but just in all of independent wrestling, because he does work a lot of other places. And honestly, Game Changer is by far the biggest company, the biggest independent company on the East Coast for sure. And I would venture to say at this point, they are probably top 3, if not the number 1 independent wrestling company in the entire country.
Okay.
So he is one of your top independent wrestlers in the United States. So that just feeds into it even more because he's a top guy. So... he's exposed more people are aware of him, more people know of him now with Darkside. Even more people know him and his story because this is the only guy so far, they mentioned it on the episode too, this is the only active wrestler that they have profiled on Dark Side of the Ring.
Right. And that was...
a lot of them have died, and the ones that they've profiled that were still alive, like New Jack, no longer active wrestlers.
That was my take, and I mentioned this to you, that in text, I felt like I jinxed New Jack because of all the specials that they've done on Dark Side of the Ring, the only 2 people that were living were New Jack and Nick Gage.
Yeah.
2 of the most hardcore wrestlers there were.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that to you less than 2 weeks ago. I don't remember exactly when I said it.
Yeah.
We could roll the tape and find it, but I said it not that long ago, and it was probably whenever we were talking about Dark Side of the Ring the last time. And I feel a little bad, like, that I had to note that, because then it just came back to kick me that, you know what? Now it's just Nick Gage. The only person that's alive that they've profiled.
I mean, that's the wrestling business, though, honestly.
For sure.
As much as I hate to say it, because I was going through it. I was talking to my girlfriend about it over the weekend, and I went through like the first couple of WrestleManias.
Almost all of them are gone.
Put it this way, every match, at least for the first two, probably all three, with maybe one exception, every match, somebody involved in that match, not necessarily one of the participants, it could be a manager, it could be a special referee, something. At least one person involved had passed.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you jump later on, because I remember I jumped to one of the later WrestleManias, and there were a good 4 or 5 matches that at least one person involved had passed. Because I mean, we all know it's a rough business. Nowadays, it's a little different. The indie business can still be rough, but for guys that are signed with like WWE, it's not as bad as it used to be. They've got they do the drug testing and yeah, those guys are on the road a lot, but they're not living like they used to live back then.
Right.
It used to be pretty rough on them, and it's definitely a lot easier now. They make it a lot more comfortable, and the business itself is different because they don't. People aren't self-medicating the same way. I won't say that they're not self-medicating because I don't know. They could be, but it's definitely not.
It's not to the level that it used to be.
If somebody had a problem, it would certainly be dealt with. They're not just gonna let dudes fall into a hole like the old days. So the business has changed a lot.
Brian Pillman.
Exactly.
So that episode for me was heavy.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was a big Brian Pillman fan.
Yeah, same here.
I was aware of him from the Hollywood Blonde days.
Yep, definitely.
Now, me and my friends would always wrestle. Like my friend John had a pool, and we would dive off the roof of his house into the pool, etc. And I was always flying Brian Pillman. Always. So when he passed, I was out of the wrestling thing. I wasn't really watching as much at that point. But I still got the word, and it definitely still fucked me up a little bit. And it was tough to watch that, how it all really happened. And we all know that wrestlers, especially in the 80s and 90s, had a propensity for utilizing substances.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't that surprising based on the persona that he had taken on towards the end of his career, i.e. the loose cannon.
Yeah.
But it was still jarring as a young man to watch another young man leave this planet. And watching the special didn't make it any easier, basically 30 years out.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is...
Or 25 years, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Part of it is the whole weird thing because it's heart failure or heart attack, but there's been a lot of those guys that have had that same cause of death.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been known... There haven't been clear lines to it, but there's...
steroids and
there's assumptions to be made that it could be related to certain types of painkillers and things like that.
Yep.
So it's not really a surprise, and knowing the injuries that he had dealt with, that's part of it also.
For sure. I mean, He had no business. Honestly, he had no business in their wrestling after that. Like,
Oh yeah,
none.
Yeah. Well, the messed up thing, and I was out of wrestling when that happened because I didn't start getting back into wrestling until '98.
And that happened in what, 96? Was
That
it
was
97?
I forget. I think it was 97.
And I'm telling you, I was barely watching.
Yeah, it was 97.
I was
So that was the year
barely
before I
watching.
started getting back into it.
I was basically watching pay-per-views only if I could steal them.
Yeah, see, I
It's
wasn't
basically
even doing that at that point.
It's basically the point where I'm at, sort of, with the UFC right now, where I'm only watching like major things if I steal it.
Right.
Come get me, Dana White.
Yeah, I was totally out of wrestling and then started getting back into it in '98 when I moved back to the Bronx and back with my mother and my brother with the black box and watching pay-per-views and shit.
Oh, I had the black box at my house too.
Yeah, so the Pillman thing I caught up on later on because I was a fan of his from the Hollywood Blondes days, and then, like I said, in a good portion of the '90s, I just dropped out of wrestling altogether.
Again, the Hollywood Blondes.
Yeah.
Another case of me just being on board with heel shit.
Of course.
Just, it's more interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, I went back and did the homework later because I knew I had heard that he was in ECW, and that was when the internet was really picking up, so it was easier to do that homework and get that back history. So I wasn't as aware of him. What I did not know, just because I hadn't really put it all together in the story, was the whole idea that he had that accident, and because he had that accident and the way the contracts were, he had no choice but to go work with Vince.
Right.
Because if he had gone back to WCW, they would have had an option on his contract, and when they saw how fucked up he was, they would have dropped him immediately.
And then that was it. He had guaranteed money with Vince.
Yeah, I was not aware of how he kind of worked himself into that corner with that accident. So once I found that out, I thought that was interesting. And the other thing is his wife's a fucking mess.
That's literally what I was gonna say, dude.
Because
that's where I was headed with this.
Because you saw what she looked like in the earlier footage.
Yeah, she was normal.
Because when they first showed her,
I was like, "Who's this?"
I was startled. I like kind of jumped off my couch. I was like, "Whoa, man!"
Yeah,
she looks terrible.
Rough. Like she went through the entire war.
Yeah, she and I knew the history with the family because I am a fan of Brian Jr. because he's on AEW.
AEW, right?
And I've seen him in indies a bunch, and I had heard a lot because they had.
Side note: he does really look a lot like his dad.
Oh, he does. It's scary.
Does he? I don't watch enough AEW because I'm just not involved in wrestling like that. But is he physically reminiscent of him in movement?
Oh yeah. It's uncanny. The other messed up thing that I think they mentioned on the show, but they didn't talk about too much, is that the daughter that Brian adopted,
right?
She ended up getting into the wrestling business also as a manager.
Okay.
And she died in a car accident.
That sucks.
Back in 2009. So I knew about her, and I knew about Brian Jr., and I had heard because all that stuff that they talk about with the rift in the family, and the mother taking the money, that all went public like a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Okay.
The daughter came out with it, and
I mean, let's look at the mom. We know where the money went.
Oh, for sure. You know what? It came out. It was a little longer. It came out like 5 years ago.
Okay.
So I heard about it back then because Brittany, the daughter, they had never talked about it. They never went public about it, and then she went public back in 2016 with it, talking about how she was taking all the money, and I think it was known behind the scenes because they mentioned on the special the Brian Pillman memorial shows that they did, which were very popular, and if you look at wrestling history, a lot of those people on those Brian Pillman memorial shows were big independent wrestlers who went on to be big wrestlers in WWE. Guys like Bryan Danielson or Daniel Bryan. You know, a lot of those guys were on the come up and they were already independent stars, and just that, and also it was a rare thing. Those shows were the only time, because they did them between 98 and 2001, so the WWF and WCW still existed. Those were the only shows that you would see where you would have talent from both companies on the show. Okay. They would wrestle their own guys. Like, you'd have a WCW guy against a WCW guy.
And you'd have a WWE guy versus...
Yeah, but you would never see them on the same show.
Right.
Like, you back then, they used to let their guys work some indie shows.
Okay.
Like, you might see, like back then, you might see, like, Edge and Christian on an indie show. Because they would allow them to do that. But never on a show where they also had WCW people.
Right. That would be blasphemy back then.
Right. And ECW also, because ECW was still in business at that point. So that was the only place where you could go and see a show, and you would see guys from all three of those top companies on the show, which was unheard of. You would never see that anywhere else. So that was a big thing, but that was just how important Pillman was, that they were all willing to just kind of put that aside. But they only did those shows for a couple of years, and I always suspected that maybe behind the scenes they kind of caught wind of why, you know, what was happening there, and that's why they stopped.
They were like, yeah, we can't do that.
Yeah. Because when she finally came out publicly with it, she did an interview and said, you know, Melanie Pillman just took all the money, and the same thing with them talking about Brian's sister, Linda, their aunt, taking care of them. That she was the one, she stepped in and saved them and kept all the kids together, gave them a place to live, made sure that they stayed in touch with each other.
Yeah, I mean, his sister seems like a damn saint.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And it's just, it's such a fucked up story, but it's so good to see Brian Jr. come out of that.
Rise above it.
And rise above it and be able to work in the business and do well, because he's done pretty well for himself. You know, he doesn't do a whole lot with AEW. You know,
but he'll do a show here and there.
He's lower. Well, he's on a lot of the shows, but he's lower on the card. It's not like he's a main event guy or something.
Well, you just got to start somewhere too, though.
But it's good to see him get that exposure and get out there and work in the business. He did a match recently, and they mentioned that he was wearing his father's tights.
Okay. Which
was kind of crazy, you know? Something wild to think about, but, you know, he's obviously doing well for himself, and all those kids seem to be doing pretty well for themselves. And that's good considering the mess that whole situation was.
The train wreck of that mother, Lord.
Yeah, she.
I mean, it seems like she kind of has it back sort of together right this moment, but with anything, that could go off the rails quick.
Yeah, and the damage is done because
way done.
She clearly has physical damage from the shit that she was doing.
Yeah. Sure.
The other thing that I think they may have touched on in the episode, but that I know from my own reading, is that she was kind of a wrestling groupie.
Mm-hmm.
She was actually with the Ultimate Warrior before Brian Pillman.
Oh, wow. That I didn't know.
I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe I had read that Brian didn't know.
If Brian
Brian didn't know that she was with the Warrior until like after they were together for quite a while. And by that point, it was probably too late.
Right.
So that's a weird little part of that story.
One of those can't put the fucking toothpaste back in the tube situations.
Exactly. But yeah, so she had a little bit of a history around the business, it seems.
I mean, none of this is surprising.
Oh no,
none of it.
I mean that happens from time to time. But
the surprise was her showing up on the screen and me being like, "Yeesh."
That was a real shocker for me because I hadn't seen her in many years. So when I saw that, I was like, "Wait, that's her? Oh shit!"
You were like, "Oh shit, this is rough."
Ooh,
oh, you said it was rough? No, you didn't say it was rough.
Ooh. But it's a shame, and you know, it's good to see those kids didn't get consumed by it like many kids that we've seen in similar situations, you know. So I think that was good, and
I got nothing bad to say about them kids.
Yeah, and to go in a different direction, they've got some other interesting subjects lined up for the rest of this season.
I'm actually intentionally not looking at the list because I like it to be a surprise each week as to what I'm getting myself into, because I don't want to spend the week waiting for the next episode, to be quite frank. I enjoy the show so much that I don't want to spoil it by knowing too much too soon.
So you don't know what's coming up this week?
I have no idea what's coming out this week.
There's been like a trailer commercial flying around, but if you don't know, I won't spoil it.
I watch the show on Vice Online, so I don't have to watch commercials during the show on TV. Sometimes I'll tape it on my DVR in case I'm not going to be able to sit downstairs and watch it just like sequestered.
Right.
But overall, I have no idea. Like, I saw the list, but I don't know what order. I don't know what's next, and I kind of want to keep it that way because
So I won't spoil it for you.
There's so little surprise in my life these days that I do enjoy this surprise.
Well, I know over the 2 seasons they've done a lot of interesting stuff, and I know they're working on stuff even for another season.
Good. I mean, honestly, you got to look at it as there's 1,000 things going on with the wrestling business back for as long as you can fucking shake a stick. So they have as many stories as they choose to want to tell.
I will say this. There's a few subjects this season that they're getting into that even I am not really familiar with.
Okay.
Which says a lot because I'm a wrestling nerd.
Familiar. Well, we will be talking about them, and
Yeah.
we will dig into whether I was familiar with it or not prior to watching the show. I will tell you that I was not familiar, as I said earlier, not familiar with Nick Gage at all. I still found the episode interesting and informative. And
What'd you think of the David Arquette thing?
yo, how did this motherfucker not know that he was about to die?
Because he didn't do the research, plain and simple. And it's funny because I think we may have talked about this before, but I watched the David Arquette documentary also, so you see it from the other side. And it's funny because they just cut over to Nick Gage at one point in like the back door of the arena before, and they're like, yeah, so how's this gonna go? And Gage just looks at the camera and is like, I'm gonna fuck him up.
I'm telling you right now, I don't know Nick Gage like that, but if you're like, hey, I'm gonna pay you money and he's gonna do a death match on you, and I would be like, let me go look, just give me 6 minutes with Google. Let me just get 6 minutes with Google, and I'd be like, yo, I'm out. I'm 100% out. You can't pay me for this. Fuck off.
Well, put it this way. This is the perfect parallel. It's just like these dudes looking to work with New Jack and not really knowing what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah,
it's
you
same
gotta
thing.
look into that, man.
Same thing. That's exactly. It's a perfect parallel because that's exactly how it went down. Because
you got to know what you're walking your ass into.
Yeah. Dude had no excuse. Like, you should have done that little Google search of Nick Gage.
I mean, it's not like we were living at that point in an age where Google didn't exist.
Exactly.
YouTube existed. Google existed. They offered you a match, and you should have said, nah, I think this is above my pay grade. I don't think I should do this. This isn't the right one. Like, I have no problem with David Arquette deciding that he wants to redeem himself for the nonsense. He looked great physically in shape for that match. And what he needed was a regular ass wrestling match.
Yeah. Well,
he could just work the match and then be done with it.
He did a bunch of indie matches. So if you watch the documentary, you see him starting to try and get himself into some shape, work out and shit, knowing that, he can't go in there looking like a fucking mess. So that's cool. It's just obvious that he didn't know.
He didn't know.
And he knew because if you watch the documentary, the first thing he does is basically some shit with some backyard kids, which is just ridiculous in its own way. But they start doing the light tubes and shit, and he's just like, whoa. Like, it's all new to him. But, like, he was already aware of it, so he should have known. He should have at least had an idea of what he was getting himself into. But
as I said, couldn't pay me to do it.
He fucked around and found out.
Not a dime on the planet that you could convince me to do that. If I get in a fight and the light tubes come out, that's one thing. But I'm not just going to just walk into that on my own.
Well, I'll tell you a crazy fact that you'll only get from the Arquette documentary. And this is a little background first. Are you familiar with a guy that's in AEW named Jungle Boy?
No.
Young dude, long blonde hair, good wrestler.
Okay.
He is the son of Luke Perry.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And he is with AEW now, but he was a regular in the independent wrestling scene in California. And he got into it because he used to go to wrestling shows with his father. And he's real young. He's in his early 20s. But he used to go to wrestling shows with his father, and everybody's like, "Oh, hey, Luke Perry," and he was like, "I want to train to be a wrestler," and he started training as a wrestler, and eventually started working indies, and made himself a pretty good name. Luke Perry is the one who drives Arquette to the hospital after
that I knew,
which is hysterical because they show it in the Arquette documentary. It's like
they mentioned
Luke
it
Perry
tonight.
knocking on the window of the hospital, like, holy shit.
Okay, not tonight. I watched the Nick Gage episode tonight. They mentioned it on.
Oh,
they
did mention it on there. I didn't remember
Yeah.
if they mentioned it on there.
Yeah. Nick Gage mentioned it. He said, and he got Luke Perry to drive him to the hospital.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they show it. They film. I guess on Arquette's phone or something. They film themselves in the car on the way to the hospital, and they show it in the documentary. So it's pretty wild.
Crazy.
But yeah, it's random LA connections, because that match was out in California. So that was. I watched that match live. It was very interesting because we didn't know what it was going to be.
I just feel bad for David Arquette.
I felt bad for him, but like you said, you got to know what you're getting yourself into, pal. Side note, another hysterical match that I watched. I once watched. I didn't watch it live. I watched it on, live on TV. Nick Gage versus Scott Steiner.
In a death match.
Yeah, there were definitely some weapons used.
Okay.
Obviously Scott Steiner was just in there to get the paycheck and do the bare minimum and get out.
Mm-hmm.
But it was funny because Gage don't give a fuck. So like, the match is over and Gage wins, and Gage is like, "Yo, get the fuck out of my ring." And I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know if I would tell Scott Steiner that.
Yeah. I mean, muscles don't make the man, but he's taken enough bumps. I believe he's tough as they come.
Let me tell you something about Scott Steiner. I used to watch him in WCW. I was a big Scott Steiner fan.
See, I was a skinny Scott Steiner fan. I was never a big Papa Pump fan.
The mullet days?
Yeah.
No, I was a big Papa Pump fan because, first of all,
holla if you hear me.
If you stuck a pin in that dude,
oh, he would explode.
He would fly around the arena. That's number one. Number two, those were the best Roid Rage promos I have ever seen in my life. He would come out on Nitro, talk mad shit. He would curse because he didn't care, because what would they do? Suspend him with pay? He didn't give a fuck. On live TV, he got suspended for this too. He said Ric Flair had more loose skin than a Shar-Pei puppy.
I remember that. I was watching the episode.
Called him an old bastard. And yeah, they suspended him with pay. He's like, whatever, I don't give a fuck. Suspend me. Yeah. With a live microphone, that dude was shooting live rounds, always. He what was the other one? Oh, he told Buff Bagwell that he was from the San Francisco section of Atlanta. Oh, I'm telling you, dude was wild. I loved it. Because, you want to talk about a loose cannon? That was a loose cannon right there, man.
I didn't hate Big Papa Pump, but he wasn't like my guy at the time. when I liked Scott Steiner, it was when, as I said, when he was skinny Scott Steiner and like flying off the top of the top rope, etc. Like that was when I really enjoyed him.
Well, see what got me, because I knew him from back then, and then when I started watching wrestling again, suddenly I was like, oh shit, that's what Scott Steiner looks like right now. But the other part of it was,
it's a big shift.
I happened to start getting back into it right as they had the split with the NWO happening.
Mm-hmm.
So he was constantly talking shit about Hulk Hogan. And I'm like, yo, that's my dude.
That's my guy there.
That's my dude right there. Between talking shit about Hulk Hogan and the Roid Rage promos, like, I was like, yo, I'm all in on this guy right now. That's my man's right there. So it was just perfect timing. But yo, he like I said, he looked like you could stick a pin in him and he'd fly away.
Oh yeah.
But also, it was just constant Roid Rage angry promos, and it was the best. It was so good. I'm pretty sure he called Hogan an old piece of shit one time as well on live TV. Definitely Flair.
I mean, was he wrong?
No, but that's what made it even better. I'm like, wow, he's finally saying something that I've been thinking for a long time. Like, that's my dude.
I'm in.
Preach.
Oh.
I love it.
Well, next week we'll have to have our segment on all things Dark Side of the Ring.
All for it. Besides Marvel and Star Wars, we all know what my favorite thing to talk about is.
Wrestling.
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 Because here it is, we're talking all this shit about ECW and everything. Like, I'm not looking anything up. I know all this shit off the head. Because I done lived it. Pretty much from the end of 1998, from like October of 98 until ECW ended in 2001, I was at every show they did at the Elks Lodge in Queens.
I have no doubt.
And it was madness. Pure madness. And I've often said it, and you'd have to watch the videos to see, you will never see a crazier crowd than the ECW crowd at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they should do a dark, I mean, it's not really dark, but they could do an episode of Dark Side of the Ring just about the ECW crowd. Because it was just insane. Dudes jumping down from the balcony to go after the Dudley Boys. Because one of them called their girlfriend a fat bitch.
They probably weren't wrong, though.
Well, I mean, you know, even if they were right, it's like, if you're that dude, you gotta make that move, unless you're Rafael Cruz.
Oh God, let's not even get into that guy.
Please. You just sit there and take it and say, "May I have another?" Yes, my Orange King. May I have another?
Did you notice just how far these people who believe in the Orange King will bend over for him? He's not even in power anymore.
What's that thing? You ever watch Ridiculousness?
I mean, I've seen some episodes.
Yeah, so you know what the Scorpion is.
Yeah. They just scorpion themselves.
Yeah, they just scorpion themselves. That's the only way to put it. I'm like, how far back can you bend? Scorpion.
Yeah.
That's
how far. Embarrassing. They're all embarrassing.
No, oh God, it doesn't make any sense. But listen, it's idiocracy. It's all idiocracy because it's just we've gone so far
afield.
backwards. We've gone so far backwards. It's like we're just thinking things that just don't even make sense in reality anymore. Like, I don't know what to tell these people.
There ain't nothing to tell them. They won't believe you anyway.
But listen, the real world is faker than wrestling. Just gotta remember that.
It's crazy.
Which was the byline of what book was it? Was it Foley's book? I have to look it up.
That's crazy, crazy, crazy.
Yeah. Mick Foley's second book, I think, is called Foley is Good and the Real World is Faker Than Wrestling. And that was in 2001, and here we are 20 years later, and that phrase has never been more appropriate.
It's a goddamn shame.
Yep. We've made ourselves so dumb that wrestling is way more believable than a lot of the shit that's going on. Yeah. You all done smoked yourself stupid. God.
Well, this has been a very winding trip to get to this point. It's been a good conversation.
Yeah, a lot of fun, as it always is, and will continue to be till we give up.
That ain't coming anytime soon.
I mean, we're about to hit a year.
I know.
Isn't that terrifying?
No, not at all. So many other things have gone on in the last year that us hitting a year of doing this is not terrifying. I think the most terrifying part is that you haven't gotten sick of talking to me after a year.
Well, obviously, we like to talk and talk and talk and talk. Because if you listen to this, you know that by now. So, but I think that's enough talking for now. Because
we'll get back to it next week. There'll be more to talk about.
There's always more to talk about. We never stop. We never stop. Anyway, theupgradepodcast.net for the links. Gary Mudley, Len Carmichael, Upgrade.
.net.
More skin than a Shar-Pei puppy.
That's the name of the episode, bud.
That was one of the best lines ever. Never forget. Anyway, see you guys next week.
Peace.
Later.